Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Sri Banerjee, core faculty for the College of Health Sciences and Public Policy with the joint faculty appointment at the Ross University School of Medicine. And today I'll be talking about toxicology, kind of defining the field and providing some interesting facts about toxic substances which can affect your body. So for starters, I think it's important to note that not all toxicants or toxins are bad for your body. And what it started off was the science of poisons. Even though over time that may have changed the understanding, it's now evolved into the study of the adverse effects of chemical, physical, or biological agents. So think a little bit about that. It's not only one type, it's not just chemical, but chemical, physical, or biological agents on living organisms and the ecosystem. So we're talking about the surrounding and ecosystem. By the way, if you see something on my head, this is actually a 24-hour EEG monitor, and it activates and measures some of the brain activity. Anyway, so there you got a little lesson in medicine and neurology. But just going into just the saying study of poisons and the science of poisons, it's more important and detailed to say the study of the adverse effects of chemical, physical, or biological agents on living organisms and the ecosystem, including, and this is important because you're talking about prevention, including the prevention and amelioration of such adverse effects. So we're not talking just prevention, but increasing or decreasing adverse effects. Or making better the adverse effects. So this is going into how these stages until sometimes don't appear until months later. It could be many forms. You could have immediate death, or it could be just subtle changes. And these subtle changes start to accumulate. And any part of the body this can occur. Especially when you're thinking about a biochemical. Now, our understanding of how toxic agents damage the body has progressed along with medical knowledge. So, toxicology is all about combining chemistry, medicine, and other factors to understand how this works. Also, some physiology would need. So, scrolling downward, one of the couple things I wanted to bring to your attention, which I knew earlier as in the field of medicine. So, one of the exenatide actually type 2 diabetes, it fights, and so exenatide comes from Gila monsters' spit saliva. And then captopril is a very well-known drug that keeps hypertension and heart failure under control. And that is actually was developed from studies on the chemical bradykinin potentiating factor, BPF. And where did that BPF come from? Never would have guessed. A South American snake. Melatonin, then, which comes from honeybee venom, is being investigated for anti-cancer and antifungal properties. So that's some interesting. Now that we've gone over some of the positives that toxicants provide, let's go into a little bit in talking about the history. So ancient history, of course, prehistoric times. They began to understand how poisonous plants and animals work. And so the extracts were used for hunting and warfare. So not only against each other, but also animals they hunted. And then they started documenting all that around 1500 BC, when written records indicate that hemlock, which is somewhat of a poison, opium, which is kind of a feel-good drug, increases dopamine, arrow poisons, like for using on animals, or certain metals that were used to poison enemies or for state executions. So post-classical history now, in 1198, with time people began to make the connection between exposure to a specific substance and illness or death. So Moses Maimonides wrote the first collection of writings in toxicology, the treatment on poisons and their antidotes. Then you have Renaissance and Age of Enlightenment, Paracelsus, then in the 16th century, talking about specific chemicals that were actually responsible for the toxicity of a plant or animal poison. So, documenting that the body's response to those chemicals dependent on the dose. That was earth-shattering at the time. Studies revealed that even small doses of a substance might be harmless or beneficial, whereas larger doses could be toxic. This is now known as the dose-response relationship, which is a major concept of toxicology. So all substances are poisons. There's none which is not a poison. The right dose differentiates a poison and a remedy. So in modern history, 19th century, Orfila, a Spanish physician, was considered the founder of toxicology. And Orfila was the first to describe systematic correlation between chemical and biological properties of poisons of the time. So he demonstrated for the first time the effects of poison on specific organs that hadn't been done before. And he had done that by analyzing autopsy material for poisons and tissue damage associated with them. So advances in DNA made sure that biochemistry was a part, and DNA was a part of understanding body function. So getting very much more granular in detail. And this was marked by great advancements in toxicology. So virtually all toxic effects are recognized as being caused by changes in specific cellular molecules and biochemicals. So if you're thinking of a xenobiotic, that is the term that is used for foreign substance taken into body. So that could be like lead, which decreases in achievement. So this is all the different types of history of toxicology. And then you can actually go back, section 1 overview. I wanted to go back to that. And so you can go further down. This is now the learning objectives. You can go into basic terminology. And so now this is an interesting definition and good to be thinking about here. So you have, let's start from the beginning. Toxicology, that studies the adverse effects of physical or chemical agents on living organisms. Then you have toxicologist, which is a scientist who determines the harmful effects of agents and the chemical, biochemical, and molecular mechanisms responsible for the effects. And then toxinology is a specialized area of study looking at microbial, plant, and animal venoms, poisons, and toxins. So terminology and definitions for materials that cause toxic effects is not always consistent. So the most common terms are toxicant, toxin, poison, toxic agent, toxic substance, and toxic chemical. So toxicant, toxin, and poison are often used interchangeably in the literature, but there are subtle differences as shown below. So if we're thinking about a toxicant on the left-hand side here, on the left here, we are thinking about pesticides, chemicals, and toxicants. So substances producing adverse biological effects of any kind may be chemical or physical in nature, and effects may be acute or chronic. Now, Amanita muscaria contains a neurotoxin. So peptides are proteins produced by living organisms. Venoms are toxins injected by a bite or sting. And then the poisons are toxins produced by organisms. So if there is a chemical or physical nature toxicant, then that's harmful. But some of these are useful in talking interchangeably. So toxic agents is anything that can produce an adverse effect. It may be chemical, physical, or biological. And this is the chemical structure of cyanide, by the way. Now, toxic agents, like biological agents, that is a virus that damages cell membranes. For instance, here, or even COVID, the way they worked is in the lung cells, and the nostrils, kind of the mouth where it was affected, the throat through COVID. Anyway, so the organisms are called toxic organisms, and so tetanus, for instance, is a bacterium, Clostridium tetani, and while it doesn't cause the disease, but a toxin, a neurotoxin, when it excretes, it travels to the nervous system and produces the disease. So now we're talking about toxic substance. So lead chromate is a discrete toxic chemical. Asbestos is a toxic material, and gasoline is a toxic substance. So toxic material that does not have an effect, toxic material that does not have an exact chemical composition, but comprises a variety of fibers and minerals. And then toxic substance, rather than a toxic chemical, in that it contains a mixture of many chemicals, they may not always have a constant composition. So there's types of toxicants. Systemic toxicants, which actually affects the whole body, and then organ toxicants. So having a systematic way to understand toxicants, for instance, benzene is a specific organ toxicant, and it primarily is toxic to the blood-forming tissues. In contrast, lead actually just goes into the nervous system, kidneys, and hematopoietic system. So the types of cells include cuboidal cells, hepatocytes of the liver, ova, and sperm, and then non-reproductive cells of the body. So those are considered somatic cells. Ova and sperm are germ cells. Tissue type is hepatocytes of the liver, and basic structure is cuboidal cells. So here's a little diagram showing germline, and then the sperm gets to the ovum, the egg, and then there's fertilization, and then Jim Smith, somatic cells are all of the different cells. So Jim Smith sperm, and then and these are called germ cells. So the somatic cells are more the rest of the body, and the sperm is germ cells. So it's haploid versus diploid. That's the bottom line there. And you can look more in genome.gov, and there's some interesting genome level research that you can look at. So going back to some of these toxicants, think about toxic effects seen at 1,000 milligrams per kilo of body weight. So the right side is all man-made, left side is natural. So let's go around in the natural and ones that have no toxic effects versus toxic effects. So the first quadrant on the left, we're looking at solanine, which is found in green potatoes, amygdalin, which is found in apple seeds, and then muscimol, found in fly agaric mushrooms. So that's all of these are toxic effects, but natural. So now let's go to the bottom left quadrant, and let's look at no toxic effects. Well, sucrose, sugar, no effect. Citric acid, like limes, lemons, no effect. Water, which is essential for life, no effect. So that's how it is. Top right, man-made, and toxic. So ethylene glycol, which is used in antifreeze, sodium thiopental, formerly used for lethal injections, and then aspirin, used as a pain-relieving drug. So all of these, antifreeze, of course, used for lethal injection, and then pain relievers, all of these can be harmful. Although aspirin, taking in moderate doses is fine. Now let's look at man-made, but not causing effects. MSG, used as a food additive, monosodium glutamate. Of course, used too much, some people get side effects like allergies. But Teflon, this is used in non-stick pans. And then aspartame is non-toxic. That's an artificial sweetener. So the top and the bottom we've seen, left versus right. Everything is poison. There's poison in everything. Only the dose makes a thing, not a poison. So let's take a look a little bit more. So we've gone through basic terminology and then kind of going. So there's a lot more here. I just wanted to go over some of the brief context and concepts. Again, this is a lot of information, but if you get through it, you'll be very much well versed in toxicology. Thank you for listening. Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Sri Banerjee, core faculty for the College of Health Science and Public Policy at Walden University with the joint faculty appointment at Ross University School of Medicine. And in this video, or if you're listening to the audio, we'll be going over not only toxicology, but also very important concept here is the dose-response curve. And before we do anything, it's going to be important to be defining dose, and then determining how dose results in determining toxicity. So comparing dose-response curves and describing the safety or toxicity of substances. So dose and its impact on toxicity. So dose defines the amount of substance administered at one point in time. However, other parameters are needed to characterize the exposure to xenobiotics. So, for example, 650 acetaminophen as a single dose, 500 milligrams of penicillin every 8 hours for 10 days, and 10 milligrams of DDT per day for 90 days. So, substances can enter into the body from either encountering them in the environment or intentionally consuming or administering a certain quantity. So, environments in which xenobiotics are present, including outdoor air, indoor air, and water, they can actually travel into the body through the skin. So there's exposure places, skin through dermal absorption, air and water, respiratory tract through inhalation, and then digestive tract through ingestion. So as you can see, dermal is through the skin, inhalation is through the lungs and nose, and then poisons that have been ingested. So the types of doses include absorbed dose, the amount of substance that entered the body through the eye, skin, lungs, or digestive and was taken up by organs or particular tissues. So absorbed dose can also be called internal dose. And then administered dose, the quantity administered usually orally or by injection. And then total dose, the sum of all the individual doses. So there's dose, and then there's kind of the response that's provided here. So what are the significant differences that need to be considered? Well, the importance of age, body size, and time. All that will make a difference. And this shows age, or this is age, body weight. Let's see. Age, time, and body weight. So then there's body surface area, and that is another method used for comparing doses among different species. So you have kilogram, gram, milligram, microgram, nanogram, picogram, and femtogram. So 20 parts per billion lead, 20 parts per billion lead. Here's the left and the right. So take a look at this and then go through the next section. So now we go into dose response, which is an essential concept in toxicology. So you have causality, which is important but difficult to determine. Threshold effect, the lowest dose where an induced effect occurs, and the slope for the dose response is the rate at which injury builds up. So within a population, the majority of responses to a toxicant are similar. However, there are differences in how responses may be encountered. Some individuals are more susceptible than others. So animation 1, let's take a look.
If we draw a graph of individual responses to a
So here it is.
Substance, we can visualize how a specific population is affected. Along the x-axis, we will have the response on a scale from mild to severe. Along the y-axis, we will show the number of individuals with each type of response. We'll use an arbitrary scale of a few individuals to many individuals within this particular population. Now, if we graph the individual responses, we end up with a bell-shaped curve, also known as a standard distribution. Notice the largest number of individuals fall within the highest area of the graph, which happens to be the mean response. In statistics, the standard deviation, or SD, is SD near 0, indicates that most values fall near.
So now I can, now that you've had the dose-response curve, now you can take a look and see what some of this is and go through some of the questions. So I don't want to belabor the point, but this is an important, Tox Tutor is an important learning essentials and principles of toxicology. And although this seems like a simple sort of subject, but it's a combination of medicine, chemistry, and just understanding cell biology and many of the components. Until you understand these fully, it's difficult to comprehend this. Thank you for listening.